Hey everyone, welcome back to the Talent Alchemy, the podcast where we explore how talent, skills, and intelligence come together to shape the future of work. The phrase future of work gets thrown around a lot, but behind all that hype is a much more significant question. What is actually changing and what does it mean for people and organizations right now? So are jobs truly disappearing? Are they evolving? Is AI replacing the human work or redefining how value gets created? So today's conversation is about cutting through the noise and getting real about the road ahead. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Caitlin Sendra, who is the organizational psychologist, a research scientist from our Future of Work Research Lab, and one of the smartest person at SAP that I've worked with. Caitlin, welcome to Talent Alchemy.
Thanks, Rinky. I'm so excited to be here and really excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. So, Caitlin, a lot of our audience or even customers, they may not know about the Future of Work Research Lab. Can you just tell us what exactly you all do?
Of course, I'd be happy to. So, success factors, we have this tiny but mighty team that we call the Future Work Research Lab. We're housed in directly in our product and engineering team because our team exists to actually serve a couple of different functions. On the one hand, we want to do all this research on how work is changing. We want to share that back with organizations across the globe. But more importantly, for us as SAP and Success Factors, we actually want to use that information that we collect to inform how we're thinking about the future of technology, the future of our product roadmap and innovation as well. So my team, we really tackle anything, any topic related to the future of work using, we do interviews with HR leaders across the world, but also combining with other methodologies like think tanks, global surveys of employees to really get a broad grasp and understanding of all of these topics relating to the future of work.
The prediction of future of work is not a crystal ball. You all work with human behavior and also tons of signals in data. Do you have any key theme to share about your recent research from the 2025-26 predictions report?
Yeah. So actually, we launched our new future work predictions report in October of last year, and we redid our entire methodology. So in past years, we really looked at just the year ahead, what to expect for the year ahead. But in our last report, we took a much broader perspective. We took a step back. We look at everything that we were seeing, all of our signals, and we actually plotted out what we think are the biggest trends and things that we expect to see over the next 5 years. And there's really a lot. I encourage everyone to go ahead and give it a read. But some of the interesting things that we're seeing is interesting shifts in how we work. So, of course, due to things like AI and technology advancements, the need to totally redesign how work gets done, but also really interesting shifts in terms of who the successful worker of the future is going to be. What does that look like? If work is changing, then who's going to be successful is also going to change. And then naturally, the future of work practices. So if how working is changing and who is working is changing, then naturally everything that we do as an HR function, all of those processes like recruiting and learning and performance management, all of that's actually going to have to be reimagined in the future. And so those are some of the interesting topics that we dive into in that report.
And when you look at today's workforce, what do you think that feels fundamentally different compared to, let's say, 5 years ago? Because things have changed a lot. Like it's a pre-COVID and post-COVID era.
Yeah, I actually think it might be easier to think of a list of what doesn't feel fundamentally different than 5 years ago. I mean, to me, really everything feels very different. I think 5 years ago we were really in the throes, the early days of the global pandemic. And I think that really served as a tipping point where organizations, HR was really forced to take a step back and think about, okay, how are the ways that we're going to move forward? Some of that I think has settled down. I think a lot of organizations have, for example, settled on hybrid work, but that was really big conversation. But, if we go back 5 years ago, ChatGPT hadn't even been launched yet. This was
Right.
pre-ChatGPT.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even think about ChatGPT wasn't there.
I know, right? But I think that was the end, like 2022 is really when we started talking about large language models. And so I think thinking about 5 years ago, one, our relationship to work I think has fundamentally changed. The relationship between organizations and workers has fundamentally changed, but also how work gets done, the technology that's available to us. I think all of that has really experienced a huge shift within the last 5 years.
Those are some great signals that tells us how the work is shifting.
Mhm.
But do you think are we witnessing a true transformation of work, or are we finally addressing a long-standing issue we ignored for so long?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you ask me from a psychologist perspective,
Mhm.
I would say that a lot of the things that we are facing today in 26, a lot of them are things that we have been grappling with seemingly since the dawn of time. So, and they haven't really changed. So, things like increasing rates of burnout and stress in the work environment, issues with productivity and engagement. So, I think some of those things still have not been addressed, and also we see kind of some interesting trends and shifts in terms of the direction those trends are headed. But I do think as we look forward from here, we are at a really, really interesting point that might force us to really finally address some of these things that haven't have gone unaddressed for so long. So one example is like every organization in the world, every organization I talk to certainly is betting on AI and the impact of AI leading to things like productivity and efficiency. But if you've got like a workforce that's very or highly unengaged or doesn't trust your leaders or doesn't trust the organization, that really kind of bites those AI adoption efforts in the foot, right? So if we don't really tackle the people problems, businesses are not going to get what they're hoping for from these kinds of AI transfer. So I do actually think now is a pretty interesting time where we're going to have to address these issues that have for so long been ignored.
Have ignored. Yeah, yeah. And you brought AI. So let's talk a bit about the AI evolution. So I have read your research paper and your team's research paper. By the way, for the audience, I'll share the link. It's publicly available. Some great content out there and data and insights. So, anyways, back to the AI and your research paper, you talk a lot about synthetic teammates versus toolmates. And then your research paper, it kind of shows that 40% of employees turn to AI for emotional support or advice. So, do you think we are entering a time where our best friend at work is an algorithm?
Yeah. Yes. I love this topic. I always when I talk about this specific topic, I always say how like these are the kinds of research findings that make me feel like I'm out of touch. These a lot of times we get research findings back and we're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I think my whole team was like truly shocked when we saw how many employees were reporting to us that they were turning to AI for support. And I think as we've had time to digest, to think, and to read more and to learn more, I always think about this a little bit as a chicken and egg problem. So on the one hand, we know that employees are turning to AI for emotional reasons. Is that because AI is better served in that role?
Hmm.
Or is that because employees aren't feeling supported at work? And so employees who maybe don't have a good relationship with their manager, who don't have high quality relationships with colleagues at work, they are turning to AI for that support in the absence of that. The reality is it could be a little bit of both,
Okay.
but I actually think that this is something that HR needs to watch so, so, so closely as we move forward. Because, like you said, Rinky, there is the potential here for employees to feel like their work bestie is AI.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
But AI is not trained to be a critical think like a person who's going to give you critical think feedback, a person who's going to say, "Hey, actually I don't think that is the best path forward." Right? The models, especially the public ones, any public model really, they're
Yeah.
trained to really ingratiate and to say, "Yes, that's amazing. You're so smart. Like you're the best." And what we know from a psychology perspective at scale is that that's not good. It's not good at the individual level. It's not good for
Okay.
your psyche, but it's also not good at the organizational level. It really amounts to groupthink, but at massive scale. So I really caution
Okay.
this topic, and I really caution what this means for people and connection. One, because as humans, we need connection to others. It's just a part of who we are. But also, I think we need to recognize that AI is not the best outlet emotionally, but also in terms of it's healthy for us to have criticism, to have people who can give us genuine
Yeah.
and authentic feedback.
Yeah. So I think AI as an efficiency booster is great, but AI as a replacement for your human teammates, I think that's what you were signaling that we need to stay away from. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe not, I always take a balanced approach. I think we're starting to see tools in the market where that AI has been specifically trained to give critical feedback, to help coach and guide people and not just ingratiate.
Yeah.
And I think there is potential there, but I think unfettered, unregulated, just
Yeah.
going to AI for all this emotional reason, I think has a
Yeah.
lot of risk.
Yeah, and I have talked to many peers at the ecosystem, and I know there are a lot of companies who are developing AI-based coaches or mentors, and there are some that has actual human mentors. I think a healthy balance of both is good. Okay, so let's go back to future of work, the favorite topic for both of us. Most of your research is centered around future of work. What are the top forces that will shape the future of work over the next decade?
It's funny because in some ways I feel like this is the part of that recent report that feels the least like a crystal ball.
Hmm.
So right at the beginning of the paper, we outline what we call like the driving forces, right? So we have the future, we have the roads we're on, and it's really the driving forces at this societal macro level that we see influencing which direction we're going to end up on, or most organizations will end up on. And we really think that these are the kinds of things that are so apparent in our day to day work that really they shouldn't feel like surprises at all. I think one of them is, of course, AI, but also broad technology development. That that is really going to have a huge impact. I think another aspect that is often overlooked is just this global economic instability.
Okay.
When we don't have a lot of predictability, that has an impact in how organizations make decisions based on a lack of stability. And then I think a third driving force, again, one that I think is quite overlooked, is what we do see in the research as a growing sense of distrust and angst amongst employees. We think that that has a huge impact in terms of how employees are going to react to the decisions that organizations make and ultimately how successful organizational decisions are going to be based on that fact. So I think those are some of the driving forces that are really going to have a huge impact. And that all of that is like underlined by the fact that all of this is happening faster than ever before. Like the pace of change is
Right. Right.
also
Yeah.
a factor in and of itself.
I think that's a great point. You talked about distrust. So you think that's the distrust by the employee towards the organization, or it's the other way, or both?
Well, I think it's both actually.
Both.
Yeah, yeah. So I think for it was really interesting. I just read an article yesterday that was like how to manage employee experience when there's a crisis every day or every week. And I think what's interesting about now in 2026, when you think about the last 5 years, I mean, if I think about my own life, it really has never felt like it just feels like things are happening in the world all the time.
Right.
Things are happening
Right.
in businesses all the time. Creates a lot of tension for employees. And then, when there's that macroeconomic instability, there's that can cause, layoffs and then that can cause distrust in employees. So it's just like kind of the straw that broke the camel's back situation of all of these pressures and tensions and stresses that
Yes.
can cause employees to feel that angst. But at the same time, as organizations are really trying to achieve extremely ambitious
Yeah.
goals,
Yeah.
there is also a sense of distrust going the other way. Like my employees are going to leave after 6 months. They don't have this sense of loyalty that they used to. And of course, we could go back and forth about, well, why might that be? And it becomes almost like a vicious cycle of distrust.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so Caitlin, do you think the leaders are over-indexing or chasing hype when it comes to future of work, or they are genuine in that in that method?
In terms of leaders over indexing on certain things over others, I think there is a lot that is very genuine. I think there's really interesting conversations right now, for example, in the candidate recruiting space. I think that there's no denying that candidates are using AI to falsify, sometimes embellish
Yes.
but it is like no doubt that that's something that organizations do need to be concerned about. In terms of other things that they're over indexing on, sometimes I think it's a matter of actually going back to basics. You
Okay.
know, when we take a step back, and we've known this forever as organizational psychologists about what motivates people to trust their organization, to be productive, to be engaged, those things haven't changed. People have always been motivated by and in an environment that's gonna be stable, that supports their livelihoods, that they can, trust where their next paycheck is going to come from. And even though the world has changed so much, those things haven't. Like creating meaningful work environments, creating meaningful jobs, creating environments where people
Yeah.
feel supported. I actually think a lot of what's happening is noise. And I really would love it if organizations would really focus on providing those basics. And I think that they would see huge, huge returns.
Okay, great. No, I think staying with that thought then, do you think there are some things organizations are done over underestimating right now while we consider this future of work aspect?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I do. Um, One thing that comes to mind for me
Uh-huh.
is this conversation around early talent. And now this is a new research program that I'm leading, so I do have some biases. I'm like really deep in all of this reading right now. But what we know is that a lot of organization leaders are saying that they don't need early talent because those are the roles and tasks that are easiest to replace with AI. And okay, so when I look at it at a task level, I understand what they're saying. Like the simplest tasks, the one that you would have given to an intern, sure, that makes sense that that's going to be the easiest to replace. But when I'm thinking about the future 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if those on roads for early talent to join an organization and develop as a young or early professional, if those go away, I don't think we're thinking about the ramifications of that, 5 years from
100%.
now, 10 years from now. And I want to ask those organizations, like 20 years from now, are you going to hire a mid level manager who has never had a corporate role before? And
Exactly.
if the answer is no, then we need to rewind to today and realize that that development of that early talent is incredibly important and essential. And I
Yeah.
think we're really, really overlooking that when we make those decisions to say, yeah, we don't need interns anymore.
That's a great thought, Caitlin. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I have actually heard a few HR leaders saying that, quotation in interviews, but I'm glad you brought that point. So let's just shift a bit to, again, our favorite topic skills,
Mhm.
careers, and jobs. So, your unique concept, again, from your research paper about expressive states, right?
Mm.
Moving beyond the static skills to capture worker motivation, interest, and the whole self data. So, are we moving beyond a static job role toward more fluid, skills based work? And what do you think that means in reality?
It's funny. I think work has always been skills based. I think work has always been an application of skills and capabilities to a job, to a work context. I think what's changing is it's taken a really long time for organizations and for technology to actually catch up to that. And that's largely been due to lack of meaningful ways to capture that data. And so what I think about now is like, yeah, we're finally starting to catch up in terms of our ability to understand the skills of our workforce. And now it's time for me to say, like, okay, if we're finally getting there, now it's time for me to let you know that actually there's a lot more to people than just skills. Like, let's get the skills, let's get that really, really good. We want to understand the skills and
Yeah.
capabilities. But I think there is really going to be an incredible opportunity that gets unlocked when we can understand not just skills and capabilities, but those other things that you mentioned, like what what not just the work that you can do, but what drives you. What work are you feel passionate about? What work are you energized by? What work, based on your preferences and your lifestyle. And I think once we get to the point where we can take all of that data together to make really informed talent decisions, organizations that really do that get there first are going to see just enormous payoffs in terms of their ability to leverage their workforce.
Yeah. No, absolutely. you mentioned a key point. Before, there wasn't any solution or technology wasn't developed to capture the data. But now that we have, which is what is driving a lot of organizations toward a skills based organization, that transformation. And when we talk about skills based organization, we both are working with a lot of SAP customers right now. Essentially the job roles are constantly evolving with technology. And a lot of organizations are asking about reskilling, upskilling. So what skills do you believe will become more valuable, not less, in an AI enabled workplace? I know there are skills specific to specific role or
Mhm.
title, but are there any specific skills you think will become more valuable over others?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at like skills like prompt engineering, for example, these things that are like very, very specific, it's almost interesting to watch how quickly that kind of when it was nowhere, it was everywhere, and now it's almost being seen as
Yeah,
obsolete.
yeah,
And I think when I look at these things on the grand scheme of things, what is clear to me, and now it's almost like a hard pill to swallow. It's that the skills that are actually the hardest to measure, the most human skills that we see as everlasting, like things like the ability to think critically, the ability to learn, like learning agility, the ability to learn new skills. So not what skills you know, but what skills can you learn and
right.
acquire.
Yeah,
I think those are going to be like if I have advice to young early talent about what skills to focus on,
yeah,
I don't have certainty about what, programming language is going to be in style or what hard skill is going to be in demand in 5 years, but I do know that those human skills are always going to be incredibly important.
okay, great. That's a great point. Everybody needs to know a little bit about AI, even though they don't need to be a coder or they don't need to apply, but they need to know about AI. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, again, when we talked about that whole skills based organization, do you think we are putting too much pressure on workers to constantly reskill, upskill? And I think it becomes even more pressure for the workers when the organization is not supporting them, but asking them to be reskilled.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. I think we often like put the expectations on employees first and just expect them to say, "Oh, my company wants me to skill. I guess I'll reskill now." It's not how things work. I mean, we've been studying this for years. Even a research program we did several years ago, the number one barrier to upskilling and learning was time. Like having the time and bandwidth and flexibility to reskill and upskill. It's not instant, even if we have technology. So they're not going to upskill without support. They're also not going to upskill if they feel like they have so much instability that they're not sure if they're going to be with that organization the next year. So I do think that we're putting a whole lot of pressure on employees. But when we look at all of the research that we've done on skills, what's really really clear is if you don't outline the really clear so what's in it for me, then you're really not going to see the return on investment that you're expecting. So it's
Yeah,
always like before we get to any of the technology, the people matters, the change management is actually the most important part of the entire process.
yeah, yeah. And I want your point of view on what organization must rethink how work can be done differently. Again, from your research papers, your team has talked about dynamic teams, how temporary project based teams are replacing traditional hierarchy. So, do you think that is a better approach?
I think so. I think so. When we first started researching dynamic teams, it felt like a little bit like we were ahead of the game. But my personal perspective is that it's not just inevitable, but it's reality. It's kind of like we were talking. Work has always been skills based, and teams have always been fluid. We have always been working with people who aren't directly connected to us on the org chart. And as we want to move to our understanding of people's skills and capabilities, I think it's only natural that like to get the value of that, people need to be able to work more fluidly, to work not just with who is connected to them on the org chart, but who's actually the most capable and available to do the work at that moment. So I do think that we're going to continue to see this as a trend of more dynamic work, more flexible work. It can look like more dynamic teams, but it could also look like more dynamic roles, more
Right.
fluid roles. Your job title being less important than the work that you're doing.
And I think that's the best way to reskill your employee and keep them motivated. Based on your research work, we have in Success Factors the dynamic team concept. And when I talk to customers about opportunity marketplace, dynamic team concept, I see a lot of favorable acceptance from customers and they want to include that solution. You have also talked about a 4-day work week paradox. Any due diligence you think needed before organization jump on trends? I would love that.
Too. Yeah, this was a little bit of something that we were starting to see for a while. It's become less of a topic of conversation, but I wanted to come back because I think that there's just so much opportunity there. These days when we talk about flexible work, we're only talking about where, we're not talking about, what days of the week. And we have seen a lot of pilots coming out, a lot of data and research coming out showing that 4-day work week can be huge for productivity and well-being for a workforce. And there are organizations that are looking to do this at scale. I've spoken to
Wow.
some of them and they seem to have extremely positive results. However, and I actually outlined that in that article that you're referring to, it's not like it's just like, hey gang, sending out an email communication starting next week. You don't have to work on Fridays. Like there's a lot of things to consider and also a lot of things to make that decision about if it's going to be right for you and your context. So, for example, if you have employees who are already so overworked that they're working on the weekends, then
Right.
saying that you don't have to work on Fridays, it's not going to really make a difference. So, there's a bandwidth, a workload perspective. There is also like depending on, what region, what country, you have to think about the regulations and what that means. That's always an important factor. There's also an equity factor too. So for your hourly workers, if you're telling them, "Oh, you don't have to work Fridays," if you're just cutting their hours, then that's actually not a solution to anything. So I always encourage organizations to look holistically, to understand what the benefits are. I think there are huge benefits, but I think there is kind of a due diligence checklist to make sure you're really considering all the factors and also making sure that you actually have the kind of culture where that's going to be beneficial. It resonates with me similar to the unlimited PTO, unlimited time off. A lot of if an organization, if people don't have the capacity and bandwidth to take off time, then it's actually not a benefit.
Yeah,
So
fair.
it's the same thing with the 4-day work week, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and fair enough. So staying with that organization, what should they rethink? How should companies rethink talent intelligence skills or workforce planning to prepare for what's coming, maybe in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I one of our main focuses in our future work report is really how work like now is a really important opportunity to reimagine work. And that requires not just, sitting down and thinking about work, but really understanding the work that's being done. Um, and I think talent intelligence is going to be a huge, huge, huge component of this, but not just talent intelligence, but work intelligence. What work is actually getting done? What is becoming more important? What is becoming less important? And then not just comparing that within my own context, within my own business, but I think the external view is going to become even more important because if your business is moving in a direction and it becomes really clear that
Yeah,
you need some skill set and that skill set
yeah,
is not available on the market, then
yeah,
you're going to have to think about other ways. You're going to have to reskill, you're going to have to
yeah,
upskill.
yeah.
So I think talent intelligence, both internally and externally, is really gonna be a key differentiator for organizations, especially now when things are quite volatile and the pace at which the importance of specific skills is changing is happening very
Yeah.
fast.
And I'm seeing that a lot too, Caitlin, because I'm on the ground talking to customers about
Mhm.
talent intelligence. So I think work intelligence is what most of them are concerned about a lot
Yeah.
now. What's changing in the labor market, the market trends, defining the right task for the right job role, and whether the right skills are aligned to that, which is what a lot of organizations are rethinking right now. Okay, so we talked about some positive shifts that we might see in organization, like the dynamic teams, the 4-day work week, maybe to work intelligence. But what current workplace practice do you think will disappear in the next decade?
One thing that I feel like I could be the most confident is resumes. I think we're
Really?
finally gonna see the death of the resume, and that is I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but in terms of recruiting really being really thrown through the ringer, but it's not just the organizational view. I actually did read a recent research paper that showed and demonstrated that since candidates now all have access to large language models, any written content in a recruiting context is no longer predictive of job performance, future job success. So resumes, cover letters, if you previously had some questions and had written responses, all of that is really you really, really need to question the value of that today. And so
Interesting.
I think we're finally heading towards death of the resume, which
Uh-huh.
for me is actually quite exciting because it means that we're gonna need to shift towards these higher fidelity ways to understand job success.
Uh-huh.
How can you really understand somebody's skills, capabilities, and fit within your organization? Pretty keen to watch to see how this plays out.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great thought. So some closing reflections. I'm going back to your 2025 research prediction. In your latest report, you mentioned we are at a great cognitive shift. And if you had to pick one prediction that will surprise HR leaders, what would it be?
Yes, it's a great question. And I think if you read the paper, this is probably it'll make a lot of sense. But I think what's going to surprise leaders the most is how much impact of AI, benefit of AI is going to have absolutely nothing to do with efficiency.
Uh-huh.
And I actually think we're over anchoring on efficiency so much right now that it's
Okay.
actually limiting the positive impact in other capacities.
Really?
I
Okay.
think if we only focus on AI for efficiency and productivity, then we're missing out. Well, one, we're kind of encouraging this new term, this AI work slop, where people just generate it, throw it over the fence. I think we need to think more about like how can we use AI to improve the quality of the work? How can we use AI to improve decision making? How can we use AI to help us think through things critically, to help us be cognitively enhanced rather than cognitively offloaded? I had one advice for leaders. It's like you need to stop thinking about AI just as an efficiency tool and probably do it yesterday.
I agree. Yeah, love
Yeah.
that. Love that. Okay. So my podcast is called The Talent Alchemy. In your view, what is that secret ingredient, if you are trying to be an alchemist, that will turn a standard workplace into a high performing, future ready organization?
Mm. Rinky, I feel like my answer is super cliche, but I
Okay.
feel like because I'm a psychologist, like an organizational psychologist, I think the one it feels so obvious, but it's just a people focus. It's a people focus, like to build a workforce that's future ready, that's going to be on board and excited and ready to grow and learn and adapt alongside
Yeah.
an organization.
Yeah.
That workforce needs to be engaged. They need to feel, that they are taken care of. They need to feel like they have alignment with the vision and aspirations of their organization. And so to me, the secret ingredient is being people focused. And
The
if
people.
you're good to your people will be good to you. So
Absolutely.
maybe it's a cliche, but I feel it very strongly.
No, I don't think it's a cliche. I agree with you 100%. The people, the humans are your secret ingredient. Yeah. Okay. Before I let you go, I have a rapid fire round for you. One myth about the future of work you would like to retire.
Yeah, I think one, we joke about the crystal ball, but actually do think the myth is that there's only one future. So that's why we just chose two paths
Yeah.
for each prediction. But as we say in the research, it's like every organization is at a different starting point. Things are happening different depending on your region, depending on your industry. So I think that is the myth is that there's one future work. Every organization is going to have a different path.
Yeah. Okay. So if we recorded this episode again in 2035, in 10 years, if I'm not retired, what would surprise us most about how work has evolved in 10 years?
Yeah, it's almost hard enough to look 5 years in the future, let alone 10 years.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, what I hope is gonna be surprising. I hope that when we look 10 years in the future, what I hope is that we're in a place where we're so like, all of this anxiety around AI job replacement is settled. Like, I really hope we're gonna be in that place where we understand that humans are always gonna have value, where we understand that AI and humans can work work together, and it shouldn't be about just replacing as many people as possible, and that we can really be in that state where we're leveraging and maximizing the potential of people and the technology that works alongside them. I guess that's not a prediction, but it is a hope.
It's a hope. Okay, last one. What's a book that you have read or a movie that you have watched in 2025 that has stayed with you and why?
Okay, I have one, and it's kind of cheating because one, it just came out, so it's in 2026, and two, I'm only 50% done, but it just came out. So maybe a lot of listeners here might be familiar with Alex Levitt, who writes a lot in the HR space, and she just published this new book called Make School Work, and it's about leveraging work-based learning to help solve the youth unemployment crisis in the United
Wow.
States. So for
Wow.
me, as I'm thinking about early talent and I'm thinking about the ramifications of using AI to get rid of early talent internships and contracts and all these things, I think her book really shining a light on work-based learning as a potential solution is really, really fascinating.
That will be on my Amazon order next.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you, Caitlin. That was some great insight. You were super busy traveling, and I'm so glad we could make this time today.
Me too. I had a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Rinky.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Stay curious, stay golden. Have a good one.